Ooh, what's going on, guys? It's Horse Beef here, and I'm bringing you another tier list video. And I have one that's probably going to get excessively long, but I look forward to these ones. And based on the comments over like the last couple of videos, you guys seem to enjoy the longer ones too. And today we're covering fighters based on how exciting or entertaining they are, or how boring they are. So we have the whole spectrum right here, similar to the overrated and underrated tier list. I'm going to be ranking them according to their entertainment level. And of course, when you're covering a topic like this, you do have to cover a wide spectrum, and there really isn't one single fighter that fits the bill more than the other, like really any fighter within the UFC. So I picked a very, very extensive list here to get into, and I'm not going to go and describe to you what the top and bottom means. It's self-explanatory, and then the A, B, and C tiers in between just represent that spectrum. Not exactly super boring, not exactly super exciting, but in between, and I'll rank them according to where I think that they fit. And first of all, we're going to get into Kamaru Usman. Now, this is a tough one because when Kamaru Usman wants to be boring, god damn it, he is boring. And when he wants to fight behind that jab, he is actually quite entertaining, but mostly just when he's getting knockouts. Like his fights, unless you're talking about the Colby Covington fights, generally don't produce much entertainment. But I would say, just based on the fact that he does push the pace and go for knockouts, or at least he did during his title run, I'll put him at C tier. I don't think that he quite deserves to be down here, because he has had great fights. So you can't exactly say that he guarantees you a snooze fest. You really can't, despite the fact that he is Kamaru Snoozman. So to be respectful to Kamaru Usman and some of the entertaining fights that he has put on, I'm going to stick him right in C tier. Sean Strickland. Now, this is one that I am conflicted about, because I am entertained by watching Sean Strickland. That's just because I like Sean Strickland, but his style isn't that entertaining. It's a jab, it's a two, and a teep. That's really all he throws. When he throws anything else, it's sloppy, and he always talks about war this, war that. We're going to go to war for you guys. And then doesn't go to war for anybody until the last 10 seconds of his fights. Listen, there's an argument that Sean Strickland deserves to be down here with Kamaru Usman, but I'm just going to stick him right in the middle at B tier, because if he is forced to fight, Sean Strickland will fight. But if he's able to dictate the pace, man, his fights can get quite boring. So I would say, yeah, he does fit the middle of this spectrum right here. Charles Oliveira, is it controversial to put him at the top? I mean, I'm kind of juggling between A and Guaranteed Fireworks, but I feel like putting him just one above Sean Strickland doesn't indicate how exciting Charles Oliveira is. So I'm going to put him right in Guaranteed Fireworks, because if you watch his fights, there's a finish on either side, guaranteed. He brings the action. He does bring a high pace, lots of pressure, throws big shots, and really puts himself in dangerous positions. We're rarely bored by a Charles Oliveira fight. I would say the most boring fight that he's put on recently was the Arman Tsarukyan fight, but even that one was pretty high level in terms of the pace and the action going on in there. So you know what? I'm just going to stick Charles Oliveira right up top there. His style is extremely entertaining, and he puts on some excellent fights. I guess I forgot to mention that we're also including fighters who are no longer in the UFC. So DJ right here, is he entertaining? Yes, because of the technique and the well-rounded skill set. He's extremely entertaining to watch. Even if a lot of his fights within the UFC were quite one-sided, I would put him at A tier. I think he's extremely entertaining to watch, mostly just down to the technique and the mastery of MMA that he displays whenever he fights. Then we get into Cal Barallo, and I wanted to include him here because he is upcoming in the UFC, and he has been improving. He did get that knockout last time out against Paul Craig, and I do find him to be pretty interesting to watch. He is well-rounded, although nothing to write home about as far as his style. He's not overly exciting, but he's also not boring. I would say he fits a similar build to that of Sean Strickland, so I'm going to keep him right there in B tier. Eddie Alvarez, another 155er who guarantees fireworks. There's no other spot on this list to put Eddie Alvarez other than the very, very top. Guaranteed Fireworks is essentially Eddie Alvarez to a T, right? That describes Eddie Alvarez to a T. So I'm just going to stick him up there. Say no more. I feel like it's self-explanatory right there. Benoit Saint-Denis. Now, he's extremely entertaining. I'm going to stick him in A, though. because he does like to grapple, but when he does grapple, it is pretty entertaining. He is always trying to advance position. He is landing ground and pound, and his fights do tend to be wars, and that's just because of the pace and the pressure that he puts on his opponents. But I just can't put him up at the very top. I don't think he's earned his spot up there with Charles and Eddie Alvarez, but I feel like A tier is pretty deserving for him. Colby Covington, now this is a tough one because same thing as Kamaru Usman. If he wants it to be a boring fight, it's a boring fight, although he does bring a higher pace. So even if he is wrestling for the majority of a fight like against Masvidal, at least it is at a high pace, although he still does just lay and pray, doesn't land a whole lot of meaningful ground and pound, doesn't really attack submissions. So I feel like it makes sense to put Colby and Kamaru Usman right beside each other, so that's what I'm going to do right there. Jared Cannonier, kind of depends on the fight. Against Izzy, yeah, it was a boring fight, but I think that was mostly down to Izzy. Clearly, when Jared Cannonier feels like he can do whatever he wants in a fight, like against Vettori, he can put on a pretty entertaining display. Against Robert Whittaker, it was an entertaining fight, but he got beat up. I don't know. To me, Jared Cannonier, he kind of fits the bill of mid-tier as far as this debate goes. So I'm going to stick him right there. Curtis Blades, I mean, he can wrestle, but still be entertaining because he is chasing finishes at all times. Brutal ground and pound. And he's pretty good on the feet, too. I think as far as heavyweights go, he is pretty entertaining. So I'm going to stick him at B tier. I actually don't mind Curtis Blades, especially in this conversation. Paulo Costa, tough one as well. Is he an exciting fighter to watch? Yes, he does have good stand-up, and he always seems to throw out techniques that you don't expect him to throw out. Like that spinning wheel kick against Robert Whittaker, and he does generally tend to be involved in wars, but the Sean Strickland display, even his display against Whittaker past that first round wasn't all that great, and he does seem to slow down. I mean, like if you're talking about wars with Paulo Costa, it's really only the Yoel Romero fight, so I would say Paulo Costa deserves to be in B tier as well. Alex Pereira, I'm going to stick him right in A tier. The reason why I say he's not as exciting enough to put in guaranteed fireworks is because you don't necessarily get fireworks with Pereira. It's a slow pace that you get until he lands big shots. And then you're excited, then you're out of your seat, and you're going, oh my God, Alex Pereira is the hardest hitter, he's the best fighter in the UFC, all that, but while his fights are going on, you're not necessarily on the edge of your seat, like screaming, going, oh, and reacting like Joe Rogan, grabbing everyone's shoulders who's sitting in your proximity. You know what I mean? Like you're not reacting like that until he gets a knockout. So he's exciting to watch with the preconceived notion that the fight can end at any moment, but the actual meat and potatoes of his fights aren't exactly super entertaining, if you know what I'm talking about. But he's still entertaining enough to put him at A tier. I think he deserves it just based off that power factor and the unknown factor of when exactly he's going to knock his opponent out, inevitably, right? Because it seems inevitable at this point, especially after that Yuri Prochazka fight, right? The rematch, oh man, that propelled Alex Pereira even higher up in the GOAT debate as well, as far as I'm concerned, man. But Alex Pereira, yeah, I think A tier is pretty deserving for him. Khamzat Chimaev, is he exciting? Yes, he is, man. Like right out the gates, he's an exciting fighter for the first round. Had a great fight with Gilbert Burns. Pretty decent fight with Kamaru Usman. I mean, it was somewhat exciting, but I would say that he is a more exciting fighter to watch than a Colby and a Kamaru Usman. So I'm going to put him at B tier because he has gone to war with Gilbert Burns and put on one of the best fights of all time. So to be respectful to him, even though he is a wrestler, he's still chasing finishes. You know, he's always going for finishes. He's never really resting on his laurels, laying and praying. If he gets you down, he's trying to beat you up or he's trying to choke you out. So even if he is a heavy grappler, doesn't really matter. He is quite exciting to watch. George St. Pierre, it kind of depends. As far as exciting goes, George St. Pierre, like his most exciting fight was probably against Carlos Condit, mostly because he got knocked down in that fight, and Carlos Condit was so game. But also, he's fighting against Johnny Hendricks. But it's really only exciting when GSP is forced to fight. When he's able to do whatever he wants, his fights historically, even though he's one of my favorites of all time, and to me he's the GOAT, it would be disingenuous to say that he was an exciting fighter. He did have exciting performances, right? When he was able to do whatever he wanted. Like I said, like on the feet against Matt Hughes, pretty exciting. He did have some good performances. Then we get into GSP. Now, even though to me he's the GOAT and he's one of my favorite fighters of all time, I can't in good conscience put him anywhere above C because he did garner a reputation, especially later on in his career, as being a very boring fighter and kind of just laying and praying. So, yeah, even though he did have some exciting fights, like against Johnny Hendricks or against Condit, he did build up that reputation of being a little bit boring. So once again, the GOAT, but I have to be realistic here. I'm going to put him in there with Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington, like the three lightweights right there. Just look so perfect, all of them lined up. Justin Gaethje, I'm going to say not much about that and just stick him right in guaranteed fireworks because that's exactly what Justin Gaethje brings. And this just shows, man, the 155 division is the division of pure violence. These dudes have all the respect in the world, and once they're gone, I mean, we already lost Eddie Alvarez, but once Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje, and a few others that are on this list are gone from the sport, I feel like they're going to leave such a massive hole in that 155 division. I guess our only hope for that type of violence is someone like a Benoit Saint-Denis when you think about it. But yeah, Justin Gaethje, is there any denial that he deserves to be in guaranteed fireworks? Absolutely not. Ilia Topuria. Now, I feel like he deserves to be up here in A tier. He is an exciting fighter. He brings that one-hitter quitter power, forward pressure at all times, high-level striking, high-level boxing with big-time power in the hands, as I said. And when it gets to the ground, he is chasing finishes. And whenever I watch Topuria, I'm thoroughly entertained. Like when he came back against Jai Herbert, I was like on the edge of my seat, and even that one-sided beatdown against Josh Emmett was extremely entertaining to watch. And then he just walked down Volk in the second round and put him out cold. I mean, Topuria's not really in boring fights. He has a lot of haters, but the dude is an entertainer, interesting personality, and he's damn legit. So I'm excited whenever I watch Topuria fight. If you're not, then you're either lying to yourself or you're being disingenuous because Ilia Topuria is almost as exciting as fighters come, in my personal opinion. Now we get another 155 legend in Dustin Poirier, probably the most violent out of all these guys, in my personal opinion, and he's fought every single one of them too, which is awesome. Dustin Poirier, same thing with Gaethje, same thing with Alvarez, same thing with Charles Oliveira. It goes without explanation. Dustin Poirier has put on some of the greatest fights of all time, never in a boring fight, at least that I've personally witnessed. He always brings the pace, the pressure, the violence, and he's a joy to watch. So Dustin Poirier, rightfully in guaranteed fireworks. Conor McGregor, now he is an exciting fighter to watch, mostly because of the mysticism and the value of his name, I suppose. So I guess whenever he's in that octagon, whenever we do get to watch him perform, we're just excited because it's Conor McGregor. But he has put on some very entertaining performances, and honestly, Conor McGregor has never been in a boring fight. He really has never been in a boring fight, but I can't put him up here because he hasn't put on absolute wars unless we're talking about Nate Diaz 2. But he is an exciting fighter because of his style. Yeah, Conor McGregor, I'm going to put him in A tier. Wonderboy Thompson may be the same thing because even though he has been in boring fights, his fights have been boring, I would say, when his opponents make them boring. You know? When his opponents make him boring, he is in boring fights. But if you think about some of the great fights he's been in, the first Tyrone Woodley, scrap, was great. Fighting against Jeff Neal, one-way traffic for the most part, but it was quite exciting. Vicente Luque, exciting fight. Heck, the Kevin Holland fight was amazing, even though, once again, relatively one-sided. But Stephen Wonderboy Thompson does not mind going to war and throwing down. And combined with his very entertaining style, he's got to be an A tier, right? He's got to be an A tier. Surely Wonderboy Thompson. DC. Now, I enjoy DC, right? I like watching him wrestle. Some of his slams are some of the most enjoyable wrestling work, I think, in UFC history, man. Those high crotch takedowns that he's pulled off on guys like Dan Henderson. So even if he is wrestling, he still is very fun to watch, I would say. And on the feet, he's quite underrated too, has pretty good hands. mixes it up quite well on the feet, and he's rarely in a boring fight. Against Gustafsson, against Anderson Silva. The Anderson Silva fight was, I guess, a bit of an anomaly because it was so random, right? And it was on short notice. But yeah, Gustafsson, both Jones fights, Stipe, pretty much all the Stipe fights, man. Daniel Cormier has put on some serious performances and some very, very entertaining fights throughout his career. But I think he deserves to be at just about B tier, but I'm actually thinking maybe he deserves to be A tier. In all honesty, let's just see how it goes. I might end up moving him up. Alexander Rakic. Now, he has put on some fun fights, but he's also put on some extremely boring fights. So, for that reason, I think I'll stick him in the same spot, maybe at B tier. I'm going to move DC up to A tier because I actually loved watching DC fight. And when you think about the amount of fights he's been in, even the Anthony Johnson one, when I think about it, man, he gets dropped and comes back, chokes him out twice. No, he's a finisher, and you have to respect somebody who goes for finishes. And DC is anything but not a finisher. This man is always trying to take the lights out or just separate you from your consciousness in one way or another. So DC, got to give him all the respect in the world. He has that A tier for sure. Peter Yan, now I'm going to stick him at guaranteed fireworks because I want you to tell me a boring fight that Peter Yan has been in. Man comes to scrap, down to his style alone. Yeah, he may take a round off to make some reads, but then once he makes those reads and he's downloaded the data and he's willing to, and he's finally willing to let those hands go, or let those kicks go, mix up his extremely deep bag of tools, one of the deepest bag of tools in the game. So his style alone is very entertaining, but it is down to the fact as well that he puts on some incredible scraps, dude. The Sean O'Malley fight, that second round, especially that third round. That third round is one of the best rounds of all time. The Sandhagen fight, John Dodson, the Uriah Faber fight, Jose Aldo. This dude is immune to being in boring fights because of his forward pressing style. And I love Peter Yan, as you guys know, profile picture, all that. You know, body pillow. I have all the love in the world for Peter Yan, and I'm gonna keep him up here. I wouldn't say that's exactly a biased thing though. Yair Rodriguez, it's arguable whether he deserves to be anything lower than guaranteed fireworks because he does put on some incredible fights. Chan Sung Jung, Max Holloway, even the Ortega fight, man. When he's out the gates and fresh, Yair is an extremely entertaining fighter to watch. He's a little bit wiry and annoying to watch him, especially when he like drops the guy and starts wailing on you with hammer fist. He looks like Donkey Kong, right? Donkey Kong hammer fist. Like, he's weird, but he's thoroughly entertaining. And I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't excited every time I heard that a Yair Rodriguez fight was booked. So I'm gonna keep him up there. Yair Rodriguez is just one of those entertaining fighters down to his style alone. Habib, I'm not really a big fan of Habib's style as far as how entertaining it is. Yes, he does push forward and throw big sloppy shots, sloppy flying knees, sloppy overhands and all that. I guess if you really appreciate that Sambo style, very grappling heavy style, and the control, yes, he does chase finishes, but I just don't feel like he's a very entertaining fighter. Maybe, you know what, just to be fair to him, because I put Khamzat up there and they are similar as far as their style goes, and Khabib does come forward and make his fights interesting, and when he does get you to the ground, he does go to finish you and beat you up. So he isn't a lay and pray fighter. He really isn't. You know, all you Khabib haters out there, and I would potentially be one myself, but I have to admit that Khabib is not the most boring out of all these Dagestani fighters. He really isn't, because he did always chase finishes, and he finished some of the best fighters at 155 during his time. So Khabib, I think he deserves to be in B tier. Zabit Magomedsharipov, I'm going to stick him right at A tier. I'm not going to put him in guaranteed fireworks because he didn't guarantee fireworks, and the reason why he is so entertaining is because of his style alone, and like I said with Peter Yan, the extremely deep bag of tools that he has, throwing out some of the wildest techniques that you don't really see any other fighters throw. Like his outside trips were amazing, right? The two-touch kicks, the Showtime kicks and all that. But the reason why I can't put him at the top is we didn't see him fight enough. And then he would eventually gas, and then his fights would plateau at some point. But until then, one of the most entertaining fighters in the UFC while fresh, I would say, but it's just not enough to put him at the very top. Davison Figueiredo. Now, he is pretty much guaranteed fireworks, isn't he? When you think about it, he is guaranteed to be in scraps. Against Brandon Moreno, they're all scraps, so you can't take that away at all. He walked down Benavidez, and really all of his fights have exciting moments. They're never boring. Does he deserve to be at the very top? He maybe does, but his style is kind of slow-paced, right? He doesn't put a high pace on his opponents, but when the action picks up, he's always down for it. I'm going to put him at A tier for now, and then maybe move him up as we get further along in the video. Paddy Pimblett, he's not guaranteed to give you a snooze fest. He really isn't. Actually, we haven't found a single fighter yet to guarantee us a snooze fest. But he's also just not entertaining because he sucks to watch. So low-level technique on the feet. On the ground, yeah, sure, he does go for finishes, but he's just not an entertaining fighter. There are different factors when it comes to entertainment, right? There's a beat factor where it's the style that's so entertaining to watch, or Yair Rodriguez where it's the style. And then you have fighters like your Dustin Poirier and your Eddie Alvarez and them at 155 who just guarantee to put you on, who guarantee to put on high-level scraps for you, right? With high pace, high action, and tons of violence. Paddy Pimblett, I would say, delivers neither of those, but he has still been in somewhat exciting fights, so I will put him at C tier. He doesn't deserve to be at Snooze Fest at all. Pantoja. Now, this is a tough one because some MMA fans consider him to be a lay and pray fighter, which would definitely constitute him as a guaranteed Snooze Fest type, but I don't see him that way because he just puts such a high pace on his opponents, and then his fights at times do have those exciting exchanges, scrambles on the ground, exciting moments on the feet, and it's because of the pace that he puts on everyone he fights. Although when he does get his opponents down, then his fights do plateau and become snooze fest at times. You know what I mean? So he himself, yes, is his style boring? Maybe you could say so when it comes to his grappling, but he just comes forward with his chin down, chin tucked, swinging from the hip. He's an exciting guy. And he has a crazy chin, eats everything, and just walks through clean elbows, clean left hooks off of Steve Erceg, and just continuing marauding forward. I don't know. I think that Pantoja is an exciting fighter. I'm going to put him at B tier. Robert Whittaker, is he a guaranteed fireworks type of guy? I mean, if you think about his track record, the Paulo Costa fight was a war. Marvin Vettori fight wasn't exactly a war. It was a one-sided beatdown. Jared Cannonier fight wasn't exactly a war. It was also kind of a one-sided beatdown. Against Yoel Romero, he goes to war. It's really only boring when he goes up against rangy strikers like Israel Adesanya. Those are really the only times we've ever seen boring fights from Robert Whittaker. And I'm talking about that second fight only against Izzy. So for the most part, he does guarantee fireworks. You know what? Guaranteed fireworks it is. Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now, I feel like he deserves to be right in the middle of the pack as far as exciting goes because he's a double-edged sword. He has excellent striking and can go to war with guys like Jeff Neal, or he can shoot for legs and make a fight extremely uninteresting and just dominate you on the ground. And I don't mean uninteresting in terms of I'm bored. I mean uninteresting in terms of just pure dominance and drowning his opponents on the ground, which doesn't always lend itself to an entertaining time watching. You know what I mean? So I think Shavkat Rakhmonov at B tier, like he's an exciting prospect, but the style, depending on the opponent, yeah, he can end up being a little bit boring to watch at times. Volkanovski, I'll put him at A tier because he doesn't guarantee wars ever, although he can definitely be capable of one-sided beatdowns, which can be quite entertaining, and he has gone to war. He's shown the capacity to go to war against guys like Brian Ortega. The entertainment value from Volkanovski comes from the skill and the technique and the ability, because his fights rarely do become wars. When you think about it, like when Volkanovski is winning, he's winning. He is winning. He's beating you up. That's the thing. So I can't put him up here, but I will keep him at A tier because I consider Volkanovski to be an extremely entertaining fighter. El Kukui, Tony Ferguson. Now I'm going to put him up here, and I'm going to try and ignore the fact that later on in his career, he declined. He declined like crazy because even in his fights where he was declining, even though he's getting beat up, they're still entertaining fights. So like Tony Ferguson, no matter what, whether he's prime El Kukui or old man Ferguson that we've had recently, all of Ferguson's fights are exciting, right? Can we deny that? Like even against Michael Chandler, he had the moment. Against Bobby Green, he had the moment where he dropped them both. Ferguson is immune to boring fights. So I have to put him up here. I really have to. Guaranteed fireworks for Ferguson only makes sense. Yoel Romero. Now, his fights have so much downtime. They always have. There's a reason why third round Romero was such a mythical fighter, is because for the first 2 rounds, Romero is relatively inactive. So I kind of have to average it out and say, yeah, he's had some exciting fights. Is his style exciting? I guess, yeah, it is, because you're on the edge of your seat, similar to a guy like Alex Pereira, where you're just waiting for that one moment where he lands the big shot and inevitably knocks out his opponent. But I have to average it out. I'm going to put Yoel Romero at B tier because there have been fights where his style just did not lend itself to an exciting fight, like against Israel Adesanya, one of the worst fights in UFC history, and Yoel Romero is partially to blame for that. So, yeah, B tier for him. Song Yadong, he is an exciting fighter. He does put on scraps. He's willing to go to war. He has an exciting style, right? Great on the feet, pretty good on the ground too. He shoots pretty well. I mean, he's an alpha male fighter at the end of the day, so the dude is well-rounded, can wrestle, can strike, good hands. He is very fast. So his style, exciting. Does he put on the most exciting fights? I mean, his fighting against Peter Yan was great. Corey Sandhagen, well, he was in that fight. I thought it was mostly one-way traffic from Sandhagen, but it was exciting. I'll put Song Yadong at A tier. I find him to be a very exciting fighter to watch. Anderson the Spider Silva. Now, I'm going to put him in A tier because he has provided us some very boring fights against Damian Maia, like a seriously shameful display in my personal opinion. And there were times where he would just fool around too much, and it's entertaining until it isn't anymore. And that's the issue with Anderson Silva. I would say without those performances in question, he would probably be at the very, very top because of his style alone. But I'm going to keep Anderson Silva at A tier, and mostly because of his namesake. Right? You see Anderson Silva attached to a fight, and you were glued to the screen because you were aware that any moment the fight could be over. Tyrone Woodley, Ty Quill, some would call him the Frozen One, right? And that nickname alone should tell you exactly where I'll put him. I can't put him at the very bottom because he has had some exciting fights, but for the most part, Tyrone Woodley has never really had the most exciting style. He's really just waiting for that one moment. And when those moments come, yeah, you're out of your seat. But when those moments didn't come, Tyrone Woodley was capable of putting on some seriously, seriously boring fights. The second fight against Wonder Boy was terrible to watch. It was a really, really terrible fight. And it's down to his style, right? Not the most exciting style of all time, and a lot of his fights would absolutely display that fact. So I'll keep Woodley in C tier. But he was a knockout guy. But if I'm putting Kamaru Usman in C tier, surely I have to put Woodley in there as well. Yeah, mostly for the latter part of his career where it was really just him being dominated or doing nothing or a little bit of both. So Tyrone Woodley, C tier, the way I see it, man. Arman Saryuki, now I find him to be very entertaining. Even when he's grappling, he's always advancing position, landing nasty elbows on the ground and on the feet, man. He's slinging kicks, spinning attacks. He's very well rounded and fun to watch. Puts on a pretty good pace. He's just good at everything. I do like his style, but he's not worthy of being an A tier. But B tier, absolutely. Sean O'Malley. Now I'm gonna stick him right at A tier, and that is down mostly to his style. Now, I don't think he's a very likable person. I'm not really a big fan of the guy because of that fact. But stylistically, he's one of the more entertaining fighters to watch in the sport right now. His striking is extremely high level. He's one of the best strikers in the UFC, 100%. And even if I'm not a fan of him, I have to give him some credit and say that this man is a joy to watch at times and has put on some great scraps. Even his fight against Chito Vera, even though it was pretty one-sided, he still made it a bit of a war and gave Chito those moments where he was able to make it a little bit of a fight, I guess. And he went to absolute war with my boy Peter Yan, even though he robbed him. It was a very entertaining fight, and Sean O'Malley is game. He's game, and I have to respect him as a fighter for that reason and put him in A tier. The man is exciting to watch. His style is excellent. Glover Teixeira. Now, is he capable of putting on boring fights? I guess, kind of. But for the most part, Glover Teixeira is a scrapper. Slings absolute meat with those hooks that he throws. This dude throws some serious hammers in there. His career's been so long lasting, and his style has evolved so much since then. And even throughout the evolution of his style, where he developed a very high level grappling game. Because I think when he first was signed by the UFC, he was pretty much like a knockout guy. He was just a knockout guy, KOing everyone left, right, and center. He was supposed to be the next guy to KO Jones around that time, but then he developed such a high level jiu-jitsu game and grappling game, and even after that happened, Glover Teixeira would still put on banging fights, right? Think about his fight against Yuri Prochazka, one of the greatest fights of all time. Even his fight against Jamal Hill, even though he got beat up for the most part, it was still a war. It was still a war. The Jan Blachowicz fight, walks him down, lands a big left hook, and then takes him down, finishes him. You know what, man? Glover Teixeira, I'm going to say he is an A-tier level fighter. He's never really bored me during a fight, even when he's getting knocked out. It's always an exciting time watching Glover Teixeira throw down in the middle of the octagon. Love watching him fight. Big fan of that man. Gotta give him respect. A-tier fighter for me. Ciryl Gane, I don't know if I should put him in C or B tier, because is he an exciting fighter to watch? Yes, he is, because stylistically, watching a big heavyweight like him, light on the feet like that, fight like a middleweight or even a welterweight, it's exciting. But his fights can oftentimes just devolve into him staying at range and landing jabs and leg kicks, similar to like a heavyweight Izzy type. But he still is pretty exciting. But it's just because he's a heavyweight. It's just the novelty of that fact. I'm looking at those in B tier. I mean, if I'm putting Khabib in B tier, surely Ciryl Gane has to be in B tier as well. So yeah, I'm going to stick him there, and I'm going to keep him there. Dan Hooker. Now, this man arguably deserves to be at the very, very top. Arguably. Has he been in boring fights? Not that I could think of. Even against Edson Barbosa. Yeah, he got beat up in that one, but it was a very exciting fight. Dustin Poirier ends up losing it. Very exciting fight. Jalen Turner won that one. Ate a flush head kick. Walks him down. The dude's an animal. He's an absolute animal. He's not in his prime. No, he's like stylistically, he doesn't even have the most exciting style, but it's the fact that he's so willing to take damage and move forward that it usually means that all of his fights, unless he's being held on the ground for the entirety of the fight, like against Islam Makhachev, like when it's a fight where this man is allowed to stand in front of his opponent and exchange strikes and display his chin, it always turns into a war. Even his fighting against Paul Felder, man. Think about the scraps that Dan Hooker has been involved in, and it only makes sense to stick him in guaranteed fireworks because that's what this man brings. Kevin Holland. Now, he's a pretty exciting fighter for the most part. I mean, he's not really in boring fights usually, but I'm just not too entertained by his style. It's just very sloppy, and I don't find him to be particularly fun to watch or boring to watch. It kind of depends on the opponent. So I'm just going to stick him at B tier and not say much more. Max Blessed Holloway. Now, I'm just going to put him in guaranteed fireworks unless he's being shut down by Volkanovski. This man is not able to be in any sort of a boring fight. Not to say that the Volkanovski fights were boring, because they weren't, but they weren't wars exactly. It was just him being pieced up technically by the better man on those nights, except for the second fight, which was a lot closer. And they're all entertaining fights for the most part, but I would say the first and the third ones are mostly one-way traffic from Volkanovski. But other than that, he sets significant strike records on his opponent's faces and then breaks his own significant strike records against his next opponent. You know what I mean? Like Max Holloway, I don't have to say anything about it. His second fight against Dustin Poirier, the recent fight against Gaethje, the way he walked down Calvin Kattar, the way he walked down Brian Ortega. The man is one of the most entertaining fighters to ever step foot in the octagon. So there's no other spot to stick him in other than guaranteed fireworks. Now let's scroll down a little bit, because we got Sergey Pavlovich. Now he's exciting because of the power factor, and he comes out hot out of the gates. I know against Volkov he didn't exactly do a whole lot. He looked like he was emotional in there and just swinging wildly with reckless abandon, but he comes out the gates and goes for those first round finishes, and it's kill or be killed with Pavlovich. It really is kill or be killed. So I'm gonna stick him in A tier. He is very entertaining, despite the Volkov loss. Like, I understand that some people might turn on Pavlovich a little bit. Yeah, it was some classist behavior, I must say. It really was. But still, he's a very entertaining fighter, and you know what you're gonna get when you get a Pavlovich fight, for the most part, right? Diego Sanchez. entertaining individual, entertaining style, entertaining person in general. Ignoring the later part of his career, this dude was not really capable of being in a fight that was anything short of exciting. But I have to take him down just a level, because I would put him at guaranteed fireworks if this is based off of his prime alone. But I'd say the latter part of his career just turning out to be very weird, and the whole Joshua Fabia saga, I suppose, did take a little bit away from his entertainment value, because he just became a bum, in all honesty. But I still think he's deserving of being an A tier when it comes to his overall career. Jose Aldo, the same. I think he's a very entertaining fighter, although aside from a few wars, I guess you can consider the Peter Yan fight a war, but after that first round, Peter Yan just beat him up a little bit. His fight with Chad Mendes, the second one, was a war. But you wouldn't really see Jose Aldo get into a whole lot of those scraps, really. At the end of the day, he would either dominate you or be dominated. But his style is very entertaining. I love his boxing, the way he mixes the hands in with the kicks as well, the leg kicks. Sit down on those a little bit. So fast, so explosive, and just an awesome style to watch. So stylistically, the man has to be an A tier. Vanderlei Silva. Now, I know you didn't notice, but I stuck him in guaranteed fireworks because that's exactly what this man would bring every single time. The dude would just sling wild Vanderlei Silva hooks from the hip from beginning to end. Either knock you out or get knocked out. It mattered not to Vanderlei Silva. All that mattered was violence. That is the only thing that matters to Vanderlei Silva. Mateusz Gamrot, fun exchanges. He is capable of some very fun exchanges, although no one would call this man an exciting fighter. It does take the right dance partner who's able to wrestle with him and make those grappling exchanges fun. But I'm going to stick him in C tier because I really don't think that he's a very exciting fighter to watch. Movsar Evloev, probably the same spot. I think ultimately he deserves to be in that same spot. I mean, really, when you think about Movsar Evloev, he is a wrestler. He has okay stand-up, but it's all window dressing. The ultimate goal is to take you down and control you there. And, I don't think he's necessarily a boring fighter, but I still think that C tier is quite fair for him. Michael Venom Page. Now, he's new to the UFC, so small sample size. I don't know if I consider him to be a very entertaining fighter. It's mostly like the in-cage antics, the taunting and all that. It's entertaining to watch. But his fights do sometimes become very boring. His fights can become extremely, extremely boring because of his point fighting style. And for that reason, I have to put him at B tier. Vicente Luque. Now, this dude is the absolute peak of what fireworks is all about. He's rarely been in boring fights. Even when he's getting knocked out, his fights are exciting. I mean, the Brian Barberena fight comes to mind, especially one of the most underrated wars of all time. This dude he's seriously not capable of being in a boring fight. Even that one rounder against Tyrone Woodley, he brought the war out of Tyrone Woodley as well. That's the kind of effect that Vicente Luque has on his opponents. You have to fight him. He forces you to fight him. There's no other option. And I know he's declined. I know he's declined quite a bit in recent years. But at his peak, and even now, right? Like even now, Vicente Luque's fights aren't boring. He's just a shell of what he was. And I guess the Dos Anjos fight maybe should take away a little bit because it was a bit boring and he did lean on the grappling quite heavily. But I feel like the plethora of wars that he's given us over the years, one boring fight doesn't take away from all that. So I'm keeping Vicente Luque in guaranteed fireworks. One of the most entertaining fighters of all time for me. Always love watching him scrap. Disgusting left hook on that high guard. The way he would just eat damage and keep coming forward. The dude's a joy to watch always. Diego Lopez. Now, this dude is so much fun to watch. Even that fight against Dan Ige, yeah, he did gas a little bit, but the circumstances surrounding that fight were weird, so I can't blame the dude. I don't think it takes away too much from him at all. But he only puts on fun fights, right? He's always going for a finish. The way he throws his hooks, a bit sloppy on the feet, I noticed against Dan Ige. But the guy just scraps and has some very high-level jiu-jitsu. The way he scrambles on the ground, he is exciting to watch. He's always chasing a finish on the feet, on the ground, doesn't matter. Diego Lopez is one of the most exciting new fighters on the UFC roster, so I'm sticking him at A tier. All right, now we're going to get into John Bones Jones. Now, this is a tough one for me to really rank him because I don't know I do find him to be entertaining when he wants to be entertaining, but even when he does take the fight to the ground, it's entertainment just because of the fact that it's John Jones and we understand what he's capable of. It's hard to describe, but he does have a very entertaining style as well. Great variety of kicks, spinning attacks. Realistically, he is an extremely entertaining fighter, so I'm going to stick him in A tier. You're just not guaranteed fireworks with the guy. He doesn't fit the bill on that level. But we can never say that someone like John Jones with the deep ass tool bag that he possesses, that he's not an extremely entertaining fighter. We just can't say that, right? Tom Aspinall. Now, is he entertaining? Absolutely. I mean, just the novelty of watching a heavyweight as quick and as nimble as him, similar to the Ciryl Gane argument. So for that reason, I guess I can't really put him much lower or much higher than Ciryl Gane, but I do find him to be a more entertaining version of Ciryl Gane. He goes for the finish more. I believe he hits harder. He just packs more power, and I think he's an upgraded version of Ciryl Gane, if I'm being honest, just with a lot more power in his hands. So yeah, Tom Aspinall, I'm also going to stick him at A tier as well. Steve Erceg. Now, Steve Erceg is a very tough one to rank him because I'm juggling between A and B tier, but for me, I'm just going to stick him right in A tier because I find his style to be extremely pleasing to the eye. Amazing boxing, and even mixed up some kicks in there too against Pantoja. Can scramble on the ground as you'd probably expect with these flyweights, right? Steve Erceg, I think he absolutely deserves to be an A tier. He's one of my favorite new fighters from the last few years. Love watching me some Steve Erceg, and I believe he deserves to be there. Bilal, Remember the Violence, Muhammad. I'm going to stick him in guaranteed snooze fest. Has he really been in a fight that you'd consider a banger? I don't think so. I mean, how many knockouts in his record? I think he knocked out Sean Brady. Sean Brady. And that's about it. Other than that, Bilal, Remember the Violence, Muhammad guarantees snooze fest. Do I have to get into it? I don't think I do. And then his upcoming opponent, and this one might be a little bit controversial if my mouse would allow me to click on this, Leon Edwards. Now here, I'm sticking him right in guaranteed snooze fest. Now, I know that might be controversial because we have guys like Kamaru Usman above him, Colby Covington above him, but the thing is that Leon Edwards never goes to war. His fights are extremely brisk in terms of their pace. Against Kamaru Usman the first time, it was a relatively boring fight where he didn't do a whole lot up until the head kick. Even the second fight was okay, and he did piece up Kamaru Usman, but he fights at such a pace that you're never fully engaged in the fight, unless of course you're a Leon Edwards fan and you just like to see him win. Then I guess that would be exciting for you to watch. But as a neutral viewer, Leon Edwards has never got me out of my seat aside from that head kick. But that doesn't make him an exciting fighter because he landed one head kick to end a fight at the dying moments of the fight. I get that moment in and of itself is one of the greatest moments of all time, but it's not enough to make him an exciting fighter. I've never watched him in a fight push the pace, go for a finish like that. He really does rest on his laurels and fight very tactically, which is fine, but it does not lend itself to entertainment value, at least high-level entertainment value. Of course, you can appreciate the technique and all that, but even against Colby Covington, he had Covington essentially shut down the entire time and decided never to push the pace against a guy who insulted his deceased father. To me, that's just crazy and shows how reluctant Leon Edwards is to get himself into a firefight. So I'm keeping him right there. I think it's deserved. I think it's absolutely deserved. Israel Adesanya. Now, this is a tough one, and I'm actually going to put him in B tier. I feel like a lot of people would put Israel Adesanya in C or even guaranteed snooze fest, but I don't think he guarantees you a snooze fest. It just depends on whether he's forced into a fight or not. If he's not forced to fight, then he won't fight. Just like Leon Edwards, except Leon Edwards never really fights. You know, you guys know what I mean by fight. I mean, like, really get in there and make it a scrap. But Israel Adesanya has shown the capacity to scrap. Plus, his style is pretty interesting to watch, if I'm being honest. And, I mean, if we're talking about recent performances, yeah, sure, he's been a bit boring. A guy got walked down by Sean Strickland, didn't do a whole lot there. Jared Cannonier title defense was boring. The Yoel Romero title defense was boring. This second Robert Whittaker fight was pretty boring too, honestly. And yes, Israel Adesanya is a pretty slow-paced, technical fighter who fights off the back foot and just goes for leg kicks consistently and really doesn't throw a whole lot of power shots unless the opportunity presents itself. So it doesn't lend itself to exciting times watching his fights. But if you can appreciate the technique and you can appreciate some of the wars that he actually has been in, against Kelvin Gastelum, for example, some of his high-level performances, like against Alex Pereira in the first fight, that was a great fight. Even though he got finished in the end, it was a great fight and a good performance from Israel Adesanya, and plus the knockout in their second fight. And guys, I'm not a fan of Israel Adesanya. I'm really not. But we can't say he is a boring fighter when you look at the entirety of his UFC career. Michael Chandler. Now, this is the only place to put Michael Chandler. I'm sticking him right in guaranteed fireworks because he's just another 155er who guarantees a war every time he signs to fight, whether it's Gaethje, whether it's Alvarez. He has fought Alvarez too, Dustin Poirier. All of his fights with all of these individuals turned out to be wars. Even he fought Dan Hooker in his UFC debut. Charles Oliveira as well. He fought all these dudes and went to war with them except for Hooker because he knocked him out in the first round. But Michael Chandler, you may not like him, but he brings the entertainment, unequivocally, I would say. And when it comes to a track record, maybe other than Gaethje, Poirier, Alvarez, there's no other fighter to really bring that guaranteed violence the way that Michael Chandler does. Even if you're not a fan of him, doesn't matter. You have to give him your respect. Islam Makhachev. Now, he's quite entertaining. I would say after the Dustin Poirier fight, it put him in my good books as far as entertainment value goes. And of course, you have to be able to appreciate the high-level technique to truly appreciate Islam Makhachev because, yes, he did go to war with Dustin Poirier, but we can't ignore the way that he wins majority of his fights, which is take you to the ground and submit you at some point. But then also, you have to take into account that he just head-kicked Volkanovski. And honestly, think about his last 3 performances. Think about his last 3. Great fight against Volkanovski. It was a beautiful technical war, one of the most technical fights I've ever seen. Head kicks him next time out in the rematch, and then just went to war with Dustin Poirier. Islam Makhachev is climbing up the ladder of being an entertaining fighter and is no longer in that category of a boring Dagestani nut hugger. He isn't. He really isn't. So, if my computer would respond, I would love to put Islam Makhachev in A tier. I think he's actually upgraded recently. I think he's upgraded as far as the entertainment value goes, and I have to give him his respect there because I think he deserves it. Nasruddin Imavov, and I think I'll put him in B tier. I think that is a pretty reasonable spot to put Nasruddin Imavov. I actually enjoy his style quite a bit. He has slick striking, slick hands. Very crisp on the feet, decent kicks, but it's mostly his hands that do most of the work. He's pretty good in the clinch, and I just like his style. I do like the light on the feet, hands low style, nice crisp boxing, good 1-2s. Honestly, great hands. The shot that he landed on Jared Cannonier that led up to the finish, early stoppage, yes, was a thing of beauty. And I do enjoy watching Imavov, but he doesn't guarantee you anything too crazy. So I think I'll just stick him in B tier and leave him there. Chuck Liddell. Now the thing about these old school 185ers and 205ers is that they all have one thing in common, is that and that is that they scrap. They would all scrap with each other. Watch Vanderlei's fight against Chuck Liddell. Both men past their prime, going to absolute war. Any of Chuck's fights against Tito Ortiz, absolute wars. That's pretty much it. They would all fight in order to finish each other. There was no pussyfooting around the octagon. There was only violence, as I've gotten into in the past. And Chuck Liddell deserves to be nowhere but guaranteed fireworks. And if you disagree, then you just don't know Chuck Liddell. And then we have another guaranteed fireworks fighter in Yuri Prochazka, probably one of my favorite fighters in MMA right now, just because of the entertainment value that he does bring. I know he just got KO'd by Alex Pereira. It was a terrible thing to witness, even though I love me some Alex Pereira. It was sad. It was honestly sad to see Yuri Prochazka in that kind of a state, but it doesn't take away from anything. It kind of adds to it because this dude, hands down, in the face of probably the most devastating striker that MMA has ever seen, when you really think about it, when you think about that power that Alex Pereira possesses, he still decides to stand in front of him with his hands down. Is it smart? No, it's not. Is it stupid? Absolutely. But do I respect it? Yeah, kind of. But just besides that, man, guy's unbeaten for almost 10 years at this point against anybody other than Alex Pereira. And every time he goes out there, he goes in and does the exact same thing, stands in the fire and waits for his moment. And when he gets his moment, he can knock out anybody, and he always goes for the knockout. That late finish against Glover Teixeira, the way that he finished Rakic after getting his legs chewed up, that finish against Dominic Reyes, Ozdemir. Stylistically, he's one of the most entertaining fighters to ever compete inside the octagon. So Yuri Prochazka, guaranteed fireworks. Love the man. I hope he recovers well from that knockout, because oh my goodness, that was disgusting. Derek Lewis. Now I'm gonna put him in C tier, and you know why I'm putting him in C tier? Because he's not that exciting to watch. He's only exciting when he lands a big shot and has a big moment. Other than that, he does not provide much entertainment. It's just him swinging from the hip, looking slow, looking sloppy, or getting taken down and held down for the entirety of the fight otherwise. So Derek Lewis, yeah, I think C tier is pretty fair for him. Aljamain Sterling. Now I'm looking at him, I'm thinking he is boring. He does take his opponents down, but he does put a pace on his opponents, and he doesn't exactly guarantee you bad fights, because we've seen him slang and bang on the feet and mix up his weird striking style, throwing spinning attacks and all that weird sloppy shots. But at least he does scrap at times. Like against Pedro Munoz, we saw him scrap. Against Peter Yan, he was forced to fight at times, and he did okay in that. So he doesn't exactly guarantee you a boring fight. So I'm going to put him in C tier. I'm going to give Aljamain Sterling a little bit of respect. I don't think he guarantees you a snooze fest. I really don't think so. And I think that's down to his style on the feet being a little bit sloppy and wild. And yeah, it does make for some entertaining moments. JDM, I'll put him right in A tier. This guy's a finisher, some of the nastiest boxing in the UFC. And then we've seen against Gilbert Burns now, he can scramble. He can scramble on the ground. So he's no slouch there either. I'm thoroughly entertained every time I watch JDM fight. Love watching him work with his hands. That sounded kind of strange, but it's all right. A tier for JDM. Oh boy, this next one is one of my favorites on this list for sure. If my computer once again would catch up, here we are. Manel Cap. I think about his fight against Dos Santos, and it makes me want to put him in fireworks right away, because this dude just stands in the fire. He's kind of like a flyweight version of Yuri Prochazka in that sense. He just stands in the pocket with his hands down, but he moves his head so well. He moves his head so well. His defense is on another level, especially in the pocket like that, inviting shots to his face, slipping off the center line, pull counters, all that. He's one of the silkiest strikers, one of the silkiest fighters in the UFC. I love watching him fight. I'm just not too sure that he guarantees you fireworks, really. But stylistically, he is so entertaining to watch. But I'm just not too sure that he actually guarantees you fireworks like that. And that, you know, it is tough to compare him to guys like Dustin Poirier and Yuri Prochazka and Chuck Liddell and these dudes, because he doesn't exactly guarantee you that high level, that high pace when it comes to violence. So Manel Cap, I think, yeah, I'll bring him down to A tier to be completely fair to those at the very top, because yeah, I don't want to devalue what it means to be in guaranteed fireworks. You know what I'm saying? Nathaniel Diaz. Now this is a tough one. He's entertaining for his in-cage antics, I will say. His style isn't that entertaining. I think Nate Diaz, to be fair, he definitely has to be in B tier, and the only reason for it is because of his in-cage antics. And when he starts bleeding and fights become a bit of a scrap, yeah, he's entertaining to watch. But stylistically, I feel like he's just not that fun to watch. You know what I mean? He's just fun to watch because he's Nate Diaz, and we love Nate Diaz. That's about it. Ian Gary. Now, I have to dock up some points. I'm putting him at C tier because we've seen what Ian Gary's all about now that he's climbing that UFC ladder. Now that he's in the rankings and he's fighting ranked opponents like MVP. See, he was being outstruck by MVP, got clipped a few times, decided to become a wrestler. Same thing happened against Jeff Neal. He wasn't exactly getting outstruck, but his willingness to hold his opponents against the clinch, despite being one of the most exciting, quote-unquote, upcoming prospects in the UFC, one of the most exciting strikers in the UFC, he doesn't seem to believe in his striking as much as he used to. You know, now he's starting to become more well-rounded, training with Damian Maia and all these BJJ guys, and you can see his style is definitely changing quite a bit. He's becoming more well-rounded, but like I've said, that doesn't lend itself to being an entertaining fighter. And his last few performances have taken a lot of hype, I believe, from him because he's just not going out there and finishing top contenders. He's just not able to do it. And I've been bored to tears recently by his fights. I just can't put him in guaranteed snooze fest because he has had entertaining performances in the past. But he's on his way to being put down there with Leon and Bilal Muhammad, if I'm being completely honest with you guys. Jan Blachowicz. I would say he's a solid B tier fighter as well as far as entertainment value goes. Great on the feet, although does like to wrestle, and his fights don't always have the craziest pace. So that's about it. But he's exciting. He's the Polish power and the very, very high potential of the fight ending via brutal knockout at some point because of how devastating Jan Blachowicz's striking is. So yeah, I think B tier is a fair placement for him. Khalil Roundtree. Now I would say he deserves to be an A tier. He almost deserves to be in guaranteed fireworks, and it's just because of his style. This dude is just pure brutality. He's one of the more devastating strikers in the UFC, the way I see it. It's just the way he throws his shots. He throws his shots with so much venom. I'm not surprised that he popped for something recently because there's just something about his explosiveness and his tenacity in the striking. It makes all of his fights extremely fun to watch because they're just so violent. And I think if he continues on this streak of violence that he's been putting on, then he's going to eventually put himself up there at guaranteed fireworks. But for now, I'm going to keep him down at A tier. Next up, we have Kyler Phillips. I would say one of the more exciting up-and-coming strikers in the UFC. Trains with Sean O'Malley, and it definitely shows in his style. So I'll put him in the same spot as Sean O'Malley. We haven't seen him against many high-level opponents, but the way that he's styled on Pedro Munoz is enough for me to put him at A tier in and of itself, because he seriously put on a beautiful performance against him. Then we have Edson Barbosa, one of my favorite fighters of all time, especially when it comes to his striking. And he's pushing the boundaries of being in guaranteed fireworks, but he doesn't exactly guarantee that. But he's super entertaining to watch. His style, right? Stylistically, he's extremely entertaining to watch. And majority of his fights do end up being scraps in the end. But it's not enough to put him at guaranteed fireworks. But yeah, A tier I think is more than fair. Robbie Lawler. Now, based off his style, right? He is just a hard-nosed brawler, sprawling brawler, nasty hands on him. But does he guarantee you fireworks every single time? He kind of does now, doesn't he? He kind of does. He's been involved in some of the best fights of all time, and versus Rory McDonald, and versus Johnny Hendricks, versus Carlos Condit, right? He does have an amazing track record of being in absolute scraps. So for that reason, Robbie Lawler is going to be in guaranteed fireworks. Then we have Anthony Showtime Pettis. Now I think I'll put him in the same spot as Edson Barbosa, and it is down to the fact that his style is very entertaining, right? Maybe not later on in his career. He went away from the kick-heavy style and was a bit more inactive on the feet, but he never lost that Anthony Pettis factor, right? Like even way out of his prime, he was able to knock out Wonder Boy the way that he knocked him out, which is a thing of beauty. And you never really know what's coming next from Anthony Pettis, right? He keeps you on your toes as a viewer, and he's extremely entertaining, right, from beginning to the end of his career. Really no difference. I rock with Anthony Pettis, and I love him stylistically. Joe Lozon. Now I'm putting him straight in guaranteed fireworks. If you don't understand how entertaining Joe Lozon is and has always been during his career within the UFC, this dude was all gas, no brakes. Even when the fight gets to the ground, he makes it extremely entertaining. His high-level jiu-jitsu, constantly attacking submissions. Like this dude is on a different level to even guys like Diego Lopez, constantly attacking submissions off his back. And on the feet, it's always a scrap with this dude, tough as nails. It's just a crazy pace that he would set. Honestly, Joe Lozon, I'm not sure if he's ever been in a boring fight, and he does guarantee fireworks. If you're not well versed on Joe Lozon's career, I would recommend seeking out some highlights of Joe Lozon, because if you're not aware, then you must make yourself aware. And I would, of all these fighters on this list, I feel like Joe Lozon is one of those underrated ones that new age UFC fans may not know about. So if you're gonna go out and seek out any highlight tape of any of these fighters on this list, go look up Joe Lozon, because this dude is seriously underrated, especially when it comes to the entertainment factor that he would always bring. Frankie Edgar, I think I'll put him in A tier. Extremely entertaining, especially in his prime, man. Quick hands. Hit pretty hard too for his size. Excellent wrestling, and he would almost always get himself into a scrap. It wasn't a guaranteed thing exactly. There were fights against Yair Rodriguez where he leaned mostly on his wrestling, but in fights where he didn't have to wrestle, or where his wrestling ability was mitigated and he was forced to stand up, those fights would always turn into scraps, and he would either finish you or get finished. And that's just how it was with Frankie Edgar. Always loved watching him fight. One of my favorites of all time, and always undersized as well when he was fighting at 155, which I have endless levels of respect for him for. Magomed Ankalaev, I don't actually think he's very boring. As far as these Dagestani fighters go, I don't consider him to be a boring fighter. And when the fight gets to the ground, yes, he does tend to lay and pray, which I don't really like. But on the feet, he's decent. Although he is still a little bit boring, right? Like the Jan Blachowicz fight, he got any sort of result in that fight from laying and praying. Yeah, against lower level competition, he does show his ability to score knockouts, which I do have to respect him for. But ultimately, I will put him at C tier because I just don't really enjoy watching Magomed Ankalaev fight. I do get excited to watch him fight because I know he has high level skill, but he's just never really entertaining for me. Michel Pereira. Now, when it comes to him, I guess stylistically, yes, he's always going to be entertaining with his cartwheels and his backflips and off the cage techniques and all that. But I feel like recently he's adopted a bit more of a measured style, and he's lost a bit of that. And he doesn't exactly get himself into wars or put on entertaining fights, but it's really just down to his fight style. So just his fight style alone, A tier for Michel Pereira. Corey Sandhagen, I would say stylistically he maybe deserves the same placement, but in recent fights, we've seen Corey Sandhagen display a deeper tool bag when it comes to his overall MMA game, take the fight to the ground, and at times make the fight a little bit or a little bit more boring than we're used to seeing Sandhagen make the fight, but he's still hella entertaining when it comes to his actual skills. Like watching him strike on the feet is a thing of beauty. Nasty boxing, nasty kicks, super diverse MMA fighter. And I love watching me some Corey Sandhagen. Brandon Moreno, he's almost pretty much guaranteeing you fireworks. So I'm going to put him right there. I can't really name a boring Brandon Moreno fight. Maybe just the Royval one. I don't know what was up with Moreno in that one. A bit weird of a performance from him. But he still does guarantee you banging fights. Look at all of his fights with Deiveson Figueiredo. Look at his fight with Kai Kara France. It's hard to really think about a boring fight that Moreno has been in. So I think he has to go up there in guaranteed fireworks. My man Drew Dober, the Giga Chin himself. I think I'll put him in the same spot, guaranteed fireworks, because Drew Dober, you think about it, unless he gets taken down instantly by someone like Islam Makhachev, yeah, the fight can be boring because he's out of his depths. But when the fight is on the feet, it's kill or be killed with Drew Dober. Always. You think of some of the crazier comebacks in UFC history. Some of them came from Drew Dober, right? He gets beat up by Terrence McKinney and then knocks him out at the end of that round, I believe at the end of the first round. Bobby Green as well, getting pieced up in the first and then knocks him out in the second, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it's all gas, no brakes from Drew Dober. He's just a big Chad-looking dude looking for a big left hand at all times, throws spinning wheel kicks as well at times. I don't think he's ever landed a single one, but he still throws them because he's just a Giga Chad like that. Drew Dober, super entertaining fighter. Love watching him. Every time Drew Dober is signed to fight, I am excited. I believe he has a fight booked against a unknown opponent. I guess they're still looking for an opponent for Drew Dober for this upcoming fight card. Whoever it is, unless it's a boring wrestler who's able to take him down and hold him down, lay him pray, guaranteed to be a banger. I'm ready to eat my words though, but man, Drew Dober entertains me almost like no other. And yet another 155er who comes for absolute violence every single time, Gilbert Durinho Burns. Now this is a tough one because he's put on scraps and then he's put on some extremely boring fights. So just for that alone, I'll stick him right in the middle. I think B tier is absolutely fair for our boy Gilbert Durinho Burns. I do like watching him fight though, I must say. Junior Dos Santos. Now he's one of the more entertaining heavyweights to ever compete, in my opinion. His nasty boxing, seriously, one of the best boxers to ever compete in the heavyweight division than the UFC. He's been in some serious wars. You even think about his trilogy with Cain Velasquez. and just any number of his fights, really. When you think about JDS, can you really come up with a boring fight that he's been in? Maybe one or two, but for the most part, especially for a heavyweight to be going to war like he does, and it's just also his style, right? He's a heavyweight that would even throw out wheel kicks, and then combined with his nasty hands, he was always a joy to watch. So JDS, I think, deserves to be in A tier. And we have Chris Lytle, super underrated fighter, would always bring the action, put on a hefty pace, and never let off, even on the ground. As I said with Joe Lozon, always attacking submissions. But Chris Lytle, I'm not super familiar with him, but I have watched Chris Lytle fight in the past, and I did look him up before making this list, and I remembered, Chris Lytle is an absolute warrior, and he would put on a show every time he would fight. And I'm going to have to scroll down because this list is getting absolutely humongous here. The Korean Zombie. Now, I think I might have to put him at A. I think the only fight that comes to mind when I think boring fight that Chan Sung Jung has been in, maybe just the Dan Ige one. Maybe just Dan Ige. But he went to war with Dustin Poirier and beat him in a war. Destroyed Renato Moicano. Even had a pretty good fight with Brian Ortega, but got completely outclassed in that one. Got completely outclassed by Alexander Volkanovski. So I feel like the boring fights kind of came later in his career where he couldn't really do a whole lot. But even you think about Max Holloway, even though he got brutalized in that one, he was game and he made it a bit of a scrap. He really did. Chan Sung Jung. I'm putting him in guaranteed fireworks. He always was down for a scrap. And God bless him. I love me some TKZ, man. I really do. Lyoto Machida, I think maybe he's more deserving of B tier. I think of all of those fighters around that weight class from that time period, like Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz. I guess Tito Ortiz was before Lyoto Machida, but I should more be saying Dan Henderson and guys like that. I would say, it was the least entertaining of them all, and it was just because of his style, right? The point fighting karate style. It would lead to a lot of downtime during his fights, but then there were always going to be entertaining moments, especially when he would get his finishes. So I guess stylistically he's entertaining, but on the flip side of that, there's a lot of downtime. So it's similar to a guy like an MVP in that sense. So I think B is absolutely fair for him. Stipe Miocic, the man is always down for a scrap, especially for a heavyweight. Nasty hands, very tough guy, and always down for it. Always down for it. So I'm going to put Stipe in A. I love watching Stipe Miocic fight. Shogun Rua, I'm going to put him at the very top. Guaranteed fireworks. Yet another absolute beast from that era. You see him signed to fight Vanderlei Silva. You know what's going to happen. You see him signed to fight Chuck Liddell. You know what's going to happen. Lyoto Machida. You know what's going to happen. Shogun Rua is a complete beast. He's always been a complete beast. And in his prime, this dude is one of the scarier guys in the UFC. So tough, nasty leg kicks, power in those hands. The dude just brought it every single time. And then his fights against Dan Henderson. Just think about those alone. It's hard to find a boring fight that Shogun Rua has been in. He just fought a little bit too past his prime, but that's not even the topic of this tier list. So it don't matter. Rampage Jackson. Okay, now he's another one from that era that I actually forgot to list. Another one from that era who brings great excitement every time he fights, unless of course he's being dominated by a guy like John Jones on the ground. But for the most part, Rampage Jackson would always bring excitement. You never know when he's going to land a big punch to end the fight. This guy had serious power in his hands, nasty boxing, pretty good defense too. And I was always a fan of Rampage Jackson, and he was funny on the mic. So all around entertaining guy. Love me some Rampage Jackson. Next one up is BJ Penn, another very entertaining fighter. And we spoke about him in past tier lists, but when you really do think about his track record, even when he's getting beat up, the fights are pretty entertaining. And in his prime, this dude is one of the most electrifying fighters you would ever see. Like really, while his prime was kind of short, but when he was in that prime, this dude was entertaining to watch. Crazy power on the feet, and then nasty jiu-jitsu as well. But he would do a lot of his work on the feet and just beat guys up. And I always loved watching BJ Penn. Even if you think about fights where he gets beaten up, like against Yair Rodriguez or against Nick Diaz, those fights always end up being a feast for the eyes, really, even if he's on the wrong side of a beatdown. You know what I'm saying? Michael Bisping. Even though I think he's a bit overrated, he is quite entertaining, but he has had boring fights. Arguably, he deserves to be an A tier, but he himself, I feel like stylistically, Michael Bisping Never really had a style that was entertaining for me personally. He was very rudimentary, very basic, even though of course he became champion and for that reason he's an all-time great. But I never found him to be particularly entertaining. So I will keep him at B tier. I think that's absolutely fair for a man like Michael Bisping. Nick Diaz. Now Nick Diaz, I would actually say, deserves to be one higher than his brother Nate, because his style was just a little bit more polished and more fun to witness than Nate Diaz. Like he had a bit more power in those hands. He was able to put damage on his opponents. And I guess there's a small sample size when it comes to his tenure in the UFC. But outside the UFC, like before entering the UFC and in between, dude, Nick Diaz would just put on scraps. Like I'm thinking back on his fight with Paul Daly. Amazing, right? But then you think about his fights with guys like Anderson Silva and GSP, where he's just clowning around. So I guess, when I think about it, I guess, yeah, his antics, same as Nate Diaz, his antics are very fun to witness. But at the same time, you know what? I'm going to put them both at A tier. Because when I think about it, their antics alone are enough to put them at A tier. They're just so fun to watch, just eating everything on the chin and then just being spiteful little dickheads and taunting and stalling and all that stuff. And, if any other fighter was to do that, we would get pissed and hate both of these guys. But because it's the Diaz brothers, we just love it. Chito Vera. Now, I would actually say Chito Vera probably deserves to be at C tier. The guy just waits way too long to get going, especially against high-level competition. His style is super basic. Like I keep saying, he relies a lot on his chin. And when the pace is pushed on him, I feel like he can't really keep up. And like I said, he just waits way too long for his moment. And by the time he gets going, he's already way behind. And it was all for nothing in the end, So Chito Vera, I would say, yeah, C tier is pretty fair for the guy. Brian T-City Ortega. Now I like Ortega. I do. I like the fact that he embraces a scrap. Whenever one is brought to his front door, the man embraces it. He attacks submissions on the ground. Even when the fight gets to the ground, it doesn't become a lay and pray, boring fight. He still attacks submissions. And on the feet, he's got a great chin. He's willing to scrap. He surprises you with some nasty elbows at times, spinning attacks. I like Brian Ortega. I do like him. He is very entertaining. He is a finisher. When he does win fights, he usually does finish them. Does he deserve to be up here? Like, I'm looking at the guys above him. I don't know if he's quite as entertaining as them. So I'll put Brian Ortega at B tier. He's like in the middle of A and B. I feel like that's really fair. If there was like a little void between A and B, that's about the perfect spot where Brian Ortega fits for me. You know what I'm saying? Tito Ortiz, the master of the English language. Now I'm putting him at A tier. He may be a laughingstock, he may be a meme at this point within the MMA community, but during his prime, this dude was scary. And even though he was mostly a grappler, he would get knockouts on the feet, and he would try to brutalize you on the ground. Nasty ground and pound, slam knockouts. This guy was just pure violence, and he was the face of the UFC. He carried the UFC at one point, him and Chuck Liddell. So he needs to get his flowers when it comes to the absolute violence that this man would bring during his prime, and he should not be disrespected for that reason alone. So Tito Ortiz, he is an A-tier fighter. I would say he's just below Chuck Liddell because, yeah, some of his fights would go to the ground, and I guess you weren't guaranteed wars all the time with him. But he would embrace the war if it would come to him. Cody Garbrandt. All right. Now this is a tough one here. He is a fun fighter to watch. I feel like his hand speed, his cartwheel kicks, just his speed in general, like the speed in which he's able to level change, all of those factors make him very entertaining to watch. I love watching Garbrandt fight, and he is a fan favorite, and I would put him at A tier. I do like his style, right? He embraces scraps even against his better judgment. But I think all of us fans are grateful for it regardless, even if he does get knocked out at times. It's all right, man. Cody Garbrandt, very entertaining guy. Carlos, the natural-born killer Condit. Now, I'm going to stick him right in Guaranteed Fireworks, and it's down to the fact that he would get himself into scraps, right? And just the chaos he would bring. And in those chaotic moments, he was able to have so many successful moments where he was almost able to finish GSP, dropped him with a head kick. I believe he got robbed against Robbie Lawler in that fight. Beautiful performance from him. Dan Hardy, you even think about that finish on Dan Hardy where they traded left hooks. Right? He eats his on the chin and then just drops Dan Hardy and knocks him out cold. And also his performance against Thiago Alves too, just putting the elbows on him, the hellbows, cutting him up, making him bleed. It was never a dull moment in the octagon, especially watching Carlos Condit fight. The dude always brought the action, and stylistically, like you think about these freestyle fighters that we have nowadays, like Sean O'Malley, the guys who are just very flowy on the feet. I feel like Carlos Condit was the original archetype of that kind of fighter. And I love me some Carlos Condit. One of my favorites of all time, 100%. I'll scroll down a little bit here because, man, this list might be the biggest list I've ever made and the longest one, 100%. Melvin Gillard. This dude, a bit underrated. He's fought the who's who. Like, he's fought everybody. I'm pretty sure he even fought Israel Adesanya outside the UFC. This dude would always bring scraps. Wasn't great on the ground, but on the feet, he was one of the most dangerous individuals around that time. Like, a serious knockout artist, and he always brought action. I would always love watching him fight. I think A tier is 100% fair to put him in. Thiago Santos. Now, post John Jones, Thiago Santos may be a bit different of a case because he had no knees anymore, and his tenacity decreased, I would say, substantially. Very noticeably, Thiago Santos was not really the same fighter after those injuries against John Jones, but pre-John Jones and even in that John Jones fight, the dude's an absolute wild man. An absolute wild man. Just his fight against Jimmy Manuel alone, the guy's throwing like 360 tornado kicks back to back for no apparent reason. It's all gas, no brakes, man. Thiago Santos wants violence at all times. And I'm not keeping it at A. I'm actually trying to move him up to guaranteed fireworks, but my browser is slowed down by this fucking website. This tier maker website, it slows down my browser like crazy, man. Holy shit. Now let's just scroll down again. Wowzers. Long way to go here. Joaquin Buckley. I'll put him at like a solid B tier. I do think he's very entertaining, has a fun style, marches you down, good hands, pretty good on the ground too. Guy's built really weird as well. He has a crazy build, and obviously he does have surprising techniques like that I don't even know how you would describe it, right? The two-touch kick knockout that he got, that doesn't exactly describe the whole story of his entertainment value, but he is entertaining. I would say similar to Brian Ortega, he exists in that void between B and A tier. Dominic Cruz. Now, I think he's very entertaining. I think stylistically, he's an entertaining guy to watch, right? His footwork, his head movement, all that, his ability to avoid shots. I do think that Dominic Cruz, all throughout his career, has been a very entertaining guy. The only thing that takes away from his entertainment value is the pillow hands that he has, right? There's really never any knockout threat, which is the only thing that takes away from his entertainment value. But he's been in some incredible fights, and his overall MMA skills, like the tool bag is so deep with Dominic Cruz. The way he would switch stances in between combinations, avoid shots, level change, everything, man. The entire tool belt of Dominic Cruz was just so much fun to watch, and then his unique style, right? No one's ever been able to replicate it aside from maybe you could say TJ Dillashaw to an extent, but it's a bit different version of that style, but so entertaining. Dominic Cruz. Dricus Du Plessis. Now he's almost deserving of being an A tier as well when you think about it, dude. Dricus is very entertaining, especially before he got his nose fixed. Before he got his nose fixed, this dude would just sling leather for the first round, gas out, and then somehow find a finish. And now that he has a decent gas tank, he's proving to be even more entertaining, which is crazy. I like watching Dricus Du Plessis fight. He's a scrapper. He is a scrapper, and I enjoy it. He doesn't really lay and pray on the ground either. He's always chasing a finish, which gives you so many points in my books when it comes to this particular argument, this particular topic of being entertaining or not. Merab Dvalishvili. Now, I can't even disrespect my boy Merab like that, even though he would lay and pray. Boring performance against Peter Yan. It shouldn't have been boring. I guess it was high pace. But he doesn't really possess great threat on the feet, and he does most of his work on the ground. But then I think about some other fights he's had, like Marlon Moraes. Guy gets rocked. I don't know how he survived that fight, and then goes on to finish it the next round against Cejudo. Very entertaining fight. Gets rocked and then comes back and ends up winning the next 2 rounds and taking them off Henry Cejudo. So it's a double-edged sword because the pace he puts on his opponents, it's entertaining. But then sometimes he'll just resign himself to holding Jose Aldo against the fence and being an absolute jack-off like that. So I can't put him at guaranteed snooze fest because he doesn't guarantee snooze fest, right? If his opponents are able to clip him and make it a fight, then he's willing to scrap. He's willing to fight, and he is entertaining to watch in those types of fights. But when he's just making it a boring fight on purpose, like against Jose Aldo, oh man, that fight alone brings him down to C tier. Merab Dvalishvili, even though I do kind of like Merab Dvalishvili, honestly, he's grown on me over time, but I'm just keeping him in C tier because that Jose Aldo fight alone, Jesus, man. Terrible showing. TRT Vitor, or just Vitor Belfort in general. Now I think A tier is pretty fair for him, even though arguably he deserves to go up here. You know what? Think of a boring fight from Vitor Belfort. Can't really think of it. From his younger days all the way up to his TRT days, Vitor Belfort was always an animal and was always trying to knock your head off of your shoulders. And that's about it, dude. That's really about it. TRT, or sorry, I keep calling him TRT. Vitor Belfort is an animal and always has been an animal. And he is an S tier fighter. Francis Ngannou. Now I'll put him at A tier, and the reason why I put him at A tier is because of that threat of the knockout. Similar to that of Alex Pereira, like his style, it's not that entertaining, right? He just swings hooks. That's literally all it is. But he's Francis Ngannou. Right, you're watching one of the most powerful punchers in the history of the world when you watch Francis Ngannou, and for that reason alone, he's very entertaining. Stylistically, not so much, but the power factor was always entertaining to watch. Just awaiting the one time he lands a punch and puts his opponents to sleep with that freakish power. And last but not least, we have TJ Dillashaw. TJ the Snake Dillashaw, Killashaw, whatever you want to call him. I've always enjoyed TJ. Like he was rarely in boring fights. When you think about it, you may not like him, but the dude was always down for a scrap. He had a very interesting style. I would say he had a bit more of a polished style than Dominic Cruz when it comes to that light on the feet, right? Free flow stance, switching stances in between combinations, switch hitting and all that kind of stuff. Slipping off the center line, using good footwork to angle off and land nice shots around the guard. You know, he did kind of bite off a bit of Dominic Cruz's style, but I believe that he elevated it. Even though he lost to Dominic Cruz, I feel like TJ's style lends itself to more power. You know what I mean? More finishing and stopping power. And I always loved watching TJ fight, regardless of what I thought about him as a human being. So A tier for him. And that is the complete list, everybody. I'm going to scroll up and down here so you guys can see, right, Guaranteed Snooze Fest, those two individuals there, C and B tier. And you do have a bit of A tier here as well. A is a massive tier. Look at all the guys in A tier. And then we get into Guaranteed Fireworks at the very top. Now, I would like you guys to let me know in the comment section below what you thought about this tier list. If you thought this was excessively long, because This commentary took me a long time to make just because of the sheer length of it. Oh my goodness, I didn't expect it to take this long. But I'm absolutely okay with it as long as you guys do enjoy it. And of course, on that note, I hope you really enjoyed this video. And if you have any ideas for future tier lists, as always, let me know in the comment section below any of your ideas, and I will jot them down on my notepad. And as always, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.